Okay, so there's 20 of you here. I want you to represent the slaves in Africa. I want you to stand up again. And I'll tell you about what happens to those slaves in Africa. Slavery is already existent in Africa. It's a domestic form of slavery. But also, what also happens is that slaves are sent north into Arabia. And of this 20, you're representing about 20 million people. I'd like you three to sit down, please. You represent those slaves who don't go across the Atlantic, but are sent up the trans-Saharan route and are kept as slaves in Arabia. Okay? And they go down to sub-Saharan Africa, and people were enslaved through that route from the 8th and 9th century onwards. A long, long time ago. Okay? So there's 17 million of you left, the equivalent of. We'll talk about what happens to those 17 million. Lots of people think the important death statistic is the amount that die on the Middle Passage, on those awful ships going across the Atlantic. The important deaths actually happen, in terms of numbers, before anyone even gets on board a ship. They have to go into the interior to get the Africans. Some of them are marched to 500, 600 miles in coffles, chained to one another. Okay? Out of the 17 million, they think about a third died before they even got on the slave ship, either on the march from interior of Africa to the coast, or in the horrible slave forts on the coast, where they were crammed together in dungeons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sit down, please. You die before you even get on board the ship. We now have 12 million left. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That's the amount of people that were sent across the Atlantic, according to all our figures. It's almost certain those figures are a slight underestimate. So there's 12 million of you left. It's been estimated that there would have been at least 10% more slaves taken on those slave ships if people hadn't revolted. And there are about 10% of the slave ships off the American coast off the African coast had revolts on them. That meant that the slave ship owners were disadvantaged. So people fought back against slavery at all points of the process. Okay. You two are going to die on the voyage. About between 1.5 and 2 million died on the voyage. That leaves 10 million in the Americas. You two die within the first year. Can you see the mortality rate here? The mortality rate is bad enough if you think about just the voyage. 10, 12% of people. But actually, people have died long before the voyage. Other people have been taken into different forms of slavery. So when we think of this, some people have called this the African Holocaust. Okay, you didn't take people and put them into concentration camps, but you took them to plantations and worked them to death. So when we think about slavery, we think about a totally and utterly heinous crime against humanity. Can we all sit down, please?